It's now a great moment to introduce the first manifesto, Vivienne Westwood, Active Resistance to Propaganda. Vivienne Westwood is one of the most influential designers of our times. When I actually had a conversation the other day with Miuccia Prada was telling me we could not think of fashion today without Vivienne Westwood's work. Everything started with Vivienne Westwood. So we are unbelievably thankful and excited that Vivienne has accepted to present here Active Resistance to Propaganda, and a very warm welcome to Vivienne Westwood and all the participants in her manifesto. Thank you. And two things maybe to add. The audience is reminded that absolutely no photography or filming is allowed actually for this performance. So we would be very thankful if you respect this. That is true for that first manifesto. And we would also appreciate it very much if you would stay for the duration of Vivienne's entire performance in order not to distract the performers. Thank you.
Right. Dear friends, just testing. Okay. Dear friends, we all love art, and some of you claim to be artists. Without judges, there is no art. She only exists when we know her. Does she exist? The answer to this question is of vital importance, because if art is alive, the world will change. No art, no progress. We must find out, go in search of her. But wait, who is this with fire-cracking, smouldering pigtails, gold teeth, and a brace of flintlocks in his belt? He's a pirate. And what does his T-shirt say? I love crap.
Pirate hands Vivienne Westwood an Hawaiian garland of plastic flowers.
Thank you.
Leave everything to me. I plunder for you. Stick with me and you might get a share of the bounty. My name is Progress.
But you have stolen imagination. There is hardly anyone left now who believes in a better world. What is the future of unlimited profit in a finite world?
I like you artistic lot, but trust me or not, I'll take you with me if I go down. We'll all burn together.
Film clip, close up. The pigtails burst into flames, and with a ha-ha, the pirate disappears in a pall of smoke, followed by black night. Still dark.
He is not Progress. He must have stolen the name.
The defiant face of Pirate Progress appears and disappears like the Cheshire Cat. Light returns.
True progress, as the Greeks thought of it, is without limit. How can things get better and better if there is a limit?
Everything must have an end, and to progress or advance in any way, you must know where you are going. An end cannot be something you choose for the sake of something else. For example, money is not an end, but a means to an end. And for this reason, I shall be set free. I am so happy. I am the famous Rodolphus, rosy cheeks. My master made a fortune from selling my body. But now my lover will pay a vast ransom, even more than my future earnings could be. Oh, liberty! I thought you were my end, but now I see you are just a beginning. Can I be happy when the other slaves don't have a beginning? The only true end must be happiness. but not just for one person. I see now that progress can be an end without limit, for there is always a better way of living. And though we may progress towards greater happiness, as an end, it will always escape us, and a good thing too. Because if we ever reach paradise, we'll all be dead.
Happiness is the true end of human existence. In practice, this means to realize individual potentialities to their limits and in the best way possible. I think we could agree on that definition.
A slave is not a person, but a thing. A thing can be something like a car or a hammer, as well as a slave. Soul-destroying, to put it in a nutshell, but my mother told me how to survive. I must try to understand the world, and that way I don't lose my soul. I know who I am. When she said goodbye, she said, "Love liberty, but forget the key, for the key turns only once. I love you."
She was your mirror. Her love showed you yourself. She believed in you.
A work of art may show us ourselves, who we are and our place in the world. It is a mirror which imitates life.
Those round convex mirrors are very good. You see a lot, but concentrated down, you see big and small at the same time. You need to fit all the things into a microcosm, but it has to reflect as well.
And turning to the art lovers,
I was just explaining this to Pinocchio.
Now that I've become a boy, I want to be a freedom fighter.
Action. Nothing is possible without art. Come with us. To find if art is alive, we must first know who she is. To the Lyceum.
We are going to see Aristotle. His analysis of Greek tragedy is such an objective breakdown that it serves to define art in general and in all forms, what it is and what it isn't.
Then finding themselves alone,
we must go back and find the others.
There's a bloke who lives in a barrel.
I shit and wank in front of people in the street. I am the cynic. The great Alexander made a point of coming to see me and asked if he could do me a favor. Nobody's better than I am. I told him to step out of my light. I'm famous because I have the balls to do what I want.
He doesn't want much.
Cool. I've found art. I could be Diogenes II. I called myself a piss artist and make lots of money.
Come back, children. Alice, we're waiting for you to introduce us to Aristotle. And Pinocchio, you're just being silly. Though Diogenes is obsessed by himself, he doesn't believe in anything, let alone himself. That's why he's a cynic. This self-promotion and doing what you want is a sham philosophy of life. No, it's not self-indulgence, but self-discipline that makes the individual. And you especially need self-discipline if you're going to be a freedom fighter.
You're right. Diogenes seemed kind of happy, but he's a poser. Too boring. I couldn't keep it up. Ha ha ha. Keep it up. I could sell canned sperm. Great marketing opportunities.
Oh, how lewd.
Aristotle, a Greek gentleman impeccably dressed, in contrast to Diogenes, stands center stage. Alice moves to his side.
Aristotle refers to the writer of tragedy as the poet. Greek tragedy was expressed in verse, but this is not the important thing. What defines the poet is that he is an imitator, just like a painter or any other maker of images. If a historian were to write up his whole history in verse, this would not make him a poet, For he tells of things that have happened in real life, and this is not imitation. Imitation is the work of imagination. The poet's role is to tell of things that might happen, things that are possible. Aristotle adds that the poet may imitate life not as it is, but as it ought to be. The way Aristotle describes tragedy is very much the idea of taking the microcosm and fitting things into it.
For tragedy is not an imitation of men, but of actions and of life. It is in action that happiness and unhappiness are found, and the end we aim at is a kind of activity, not a quality. In accordance with their characters, men are of such and such a quality. In accordance with their actions, they are fortunate or the reverse. Consequently, it is not for the purpose of presenting their characters that the agents engage in action, but rather it is for the sake of their actions that they take on the characters they have. Thus, what happens, that is, the plot, is the end for which a tragedy exists. And the end or purpose is the most important thing of all.
Dear Aristotle, thank you for stating the links between character, action, and fortune. I remember you once said that character is a person's habit of moral choice. But please now tell us what you mean when you describe a work of imitation, in this case, tragedy as the whole.
The events which are part of the plot must be so organized that if any of them is displaced or taken away, the whole will be shaken and put out of joint. For if the presence or absence of a thing makes no discernible difference, then that thing is not part of the whole.
Aristotle retires.
That's how I feel about Velasquez. That exhibition was the most powerful thing I've ever seen, yet his work is so minimal and reduced. The people in the paintings were so real that I sometimes thought they weren't there, especially in the split second before you turned to look again. The paint was so thin, I was so stunned. I just wanted to melt into a pool on the floor.
One can begin to grasp something of the obsession people have had with the idea of the circle as a perfect form. I'm just going to ad-lib a little bit here because when I talk about the microcosm and the idea of a magic circle, I have in mind magic ritual where people represent the world by putting things into this drawn circle. Another way of thinking of the microcosm is that a human being sort of represents the cosmos. But I do think that the interest that we have in art is because it's not like real life and because it is encircled. Maybe it's a picture in a frame, but it has got a confine and it's got a middle and a beginning and an end and it's got cause and effect. And somehow or other, it helps us to focus on something really artificial, but which explains the chaos that we live in. It's an abstraction, a way of rationalizing and epitomizing ideas and the world we live in. And I just believe that's exactly why we get such satisfaction from art. So there's quite a few faults in the manifesto that. So I just sort of ad-lib a little bit to give a more clear picture. So one can begin to grasp something of the obsession people have had with the idea of the circle as a perfect form. A work of art, then, is an imitation reduced to its essentials, thereby forming a whole, as in a magic circle. Thus, art gives objectivity, a perspective, an overview. We define objectivity very simply as seeing things as they are. Of course, we can only see things from a human point of view, but it's still an attempt to be objective. Real life is not objective. We can never get the complete picture. It is chaotic and continuous, a jumble of particulars in which events are engulfed in the flux of circumstance. How can the artist be objective when he himself is part of the change? He needs a fixed fact to stand on, a standard, a measure, a model.
Tell me all about it. If there's nothing fixed in the world, then you find yourself in Wonderland, where everything changes, including yourself. You try to play a game of croquet with the flamingo for a mallet, and the ball is a hedgehog who runs away.
A hedgehog must understand the world from a hedgehog point of view. And we are condemned. We must understand it from a human point of view. We do have a fixed standard, timeless, universal, recognizable. We refer to it as representative human nature. It is the key to this manifesto. What do we mean by this? We mean that you and I, as individuals, we change. But there is something typical about us which does not change. When we say man is the measure of all things, we mean the unchanging part, the part we have in common. Man, both in his general nature and according to his various types. This is representative human nature. Aristotle takes this for granted when he says, in accordance with their character, men are of such and such a quality. It is for the sake of their actions that the actors take on the characters they have. They take them on, the characters they have. He also says that the best characters in a play are people with whom we can empathize, someone like ourselves. For example, Chaucer's characters are as alive to us today as when he first invented them, timeless, outside of time. They speak to us of the human genius, l'esprit humain, I expect it is in French, what it is to be human. Each detail illuminates the type and is what we call the universal in the particular, someone like ourselves. And we all recognize this automatically. A baby recognizes it. But nevertheless, we are also trained to recognize it more and more through experience. So when we recognize this, we are being objective. Through putting ourselves in the place of another, we leave our ego behind and recognize our common bond. We're not saying that art has to be confined to the direct portrayal of human beings. We do say that art must be representational. For it is only in imitation, this microcosm that I'm talking about, in imitation, that objectivity lies. Now then, I have written, in practice, through his medium of representative human nature, the artist gains imaginative insight into the general nature of things, and his view extends from the model. This is true, but I feel that the manifesto needs to be more concrete here and explain more clearly what I want to say, and I'm just going to try and explain that a little bit. So, because what I'm trying to get at is that we have something which is an intelligence, a thing that is imaginative. Nobody knows exactly what intelligence is composed of. It's us. We are our intelligence. But we really do have this power of recognizing each other. And we have this power of recognizing what is true to life. What I'm against is people, all this individuality, this extreme, or, you know, just, you know, I don't know, cut your hand off, how artistic. You know, I mean, we really, and so what I'm trying to get at is the thing that communicates to everybody is something representative. Even if we've never seen it before, we recognize it as true to life. And it's not only can we recognize this in human beings, but we can recognize it in things. The thing that makes human beings different from animals is that we can copy each other. Animals do not copy each other. I saw a young blackbird a month or so ago. Its parents had been feeding it. It had left the nest. And it didn't know what to eat. It was picking up stones, bits of chewing gum. It had no idea what to eat. It had to find a way to eat. It doesn't learn to eat by copying. It doesn't learn what it has to do by copying. It's all sort of some funny program inside where it has to keep trial and error to find it out. And we can copy each other, and more than that, we can copy different patterns of behavior. We can copy it artistically with something else. For example, we hear music and we can dance. And apparently an ape can't dance. They can't copy things. They can't transfer things from one to another. And we have this inbuilt thing. It's something that we can do. And so we can see a drawing and recognize it as something. Nevertheless, there's a lot of training in this. And the question would be, if a blind person, somebody who had been blind all their life, could suddenly see, would they see? No, they wouldn't. They would somehow or other have to accept certain codes of seeing. But it's something that we can do. And what I'm saying is that what makes art universal is when we recognize it as being true to life, and we have this power. And this is the thing that is at the center of why art is so important to us. And I believe that art gives us culture, and it's this common bond that we understand that makes us recognize each other, and that we recognize each other in works of art, and therefore we recognize something in works of art which we hold in common, and that this is culture. And this is what I'm getting at in all of this, but I will read it possibly without interruptions now, because this is what I'm trying to get at. Anyway, so, wherever I was up to, it's here. So I was saying that the general nature of things extends from the model, and our model, of course, is representative human nature. That's the key that says, yes, I do know that's true to life. Consider the Chinese master, the painter of bamboo. We have a shared object, the non-ego, representative human nature. And from this fact, he reaches out and grasps the very cipher and nature of bamboo. And we see through his eyes his own particular poem of life, perfect as it ought to be. Consider the divine music of Bach. Bach is pure objectivity, the most representative of men because the least egotistical in front of his talent. Music has not yet been conceptualized by the art mafia, though I'm sure they're trying. We sometimes hear what they're trying to do. But we do not yet accept a symphony composed on the remaining 3 keys of a broken piano, accompanied by the random throwing of marbles at a urinal, for example. Yet its equivalent is the latest thing in the visual arts. aren't you OD'd on the latest thing? Indeed, the visual artist has gone further. He has set up the urinal as art, claimed the broken piano as his production. Why? Because he chose it. Relying nowadays, on presentation skills and self-promotion, behold the artist, as long as we believe him. And abstract art, which is supposed to be symbolic and expressive of events in the mind, unfortunately, these canvases offer us no help in becoming mind readers. We do have such things as abstract symbols. For example, a number 10, X, the Romans called it quite arbitrary. We give them arbitrary symbols. But the artist must explain his personal marks. If the artist fails the test of objectivity, where does that leave us?
Oh, hello, Mr. White Rabbit. Please stop a moment. The artist has just produced a giant hole in the air. Perhaps he thought it was a hole. I'm sure you have an interesting observation on holes.
Negative. Rushing off.
Super. Intellectual irony. Right on.
What do you mean, we're not mind readers? We've all got a hole in the head, and we can fill it with whatever hole we want.
Changes his price tag on the hat from 10 and 6 to 10 million.
I'm going to be a real painter and a freedom fighter. I've been drawing in secret to see the world as it ought to be. That can't be bad for a freedom fighter. Hard work, though.
Pinocchio, you know that there are two sides to people, the donkey and the boy. The self who wants to live in Toyland versus the self who wants to grow up. It's the inner struggle between doing what you want and being true to your best self that humanizes a puppet.
Dear little cricket, I still get around. Have a laugh. But, yeah, the inner voice is always having a go. Pinocchio, don't be an arsehole. I am your human genius. Listen to me.
Pinocchio, the whole future of art is at stake and depends on you and others controlling your imagination and listening to your best self, your human genius. Imagination is the driving force in human nature, but it is likely to run wild and escape into the chaos of endless desire, unfulfilled longing, consumerism, and alienation.
Alienation, hell, those donkeys' ears. What a terrible price to pay, poor Candlewick.
Candlewick was Pinocchio's friend in Toyland, who became a donkey and was worked to death by a cruel master.
The way we control the imagination is through the imagination itself, or rather, we control it through the best part, the ethical part. We call it the ethical imagination. It's a power, it's not just reason, it's something that happens automatically. Reason also can be a control. But the ethical imagination is an inner check, and it prefers to see things as they are. True to life, we do know if it's true or not. It questions art. Is it probable? Is it true to life? Could it be different? Could it be otherwise? Critics in the 17th century objected, I'm giving an example, of course, to Corneille's play, Le Cid. They said that it wasn't probable because it was not normal or true to nature that the heroine might be allowed to marry her father's murderer. That this was bizarre, extreme, and therefore, they said, unethical. Others disagreed, and there was a battle of opinion. It shows, you see, that ethics can change. It is constantly developing in relation to how we view the world at the moment. There are no rules. Each person must decide. Yet we're not completely at sea if we refer to our model, representative human nature. To the great artist, the ethical imagination is absolute. This is what makes him great. He never ceases to explore and cultivate it. To us, to the art lover, we possess it in differing degrees, but all of us may cultivate it. It's intuitive. You get at the truth through insight, and you get better at it with practice, through comparing one thing with another, comparing works of art and comparing works of art with real life. You need the stamina of a lifetime to develop this. In general, the true artist is always true to his art. The imposter is self-conscious, demonstrating his idea, projecting his theory, his ego. And for example, the figures of the painter are not borrowed ideas who demonstrate themselves talking, dying, dreaming. They do it. We believe them in that painting. They are of themselves and they live. And the flowers are not showing us how pretty they are or how weird. They are what they are, etc. No invention for the sake of invention. Invention must serve the purpose of art. Art is the only objectivity available to human beings. Real life, including science, cannot do this. But we must see the world from a human point of view. Even science now recognizes that we will never understand the world. We can only understand it from a human point of view. To recapitulate, the artist, taking representative human nature as his model, presents an imitation of life. The imitation is a completed view, a whole, as in a microcosm, even though it's an illusion of reality. The illusion captures our imagination, and the ethical imagination says to us, is it true? We see our human face, we see each other, and we ask, could it be otherwise? Without judges, there is no art. We, the art lovers, respond to the truths of art and spread the ideas which give culture. Without, where am I? Yeah. Thus, representative human nature is the authority on which culture rests. This is the model. Everything rests on it. Culture must rest on something abiding, an authority, a belief. But our authority is not dogma. No need for God to supply the social cement or fill the spiritual vacuum, but the authority of a consensus. We don't like that word, consensus, but it is true. Our authority is based on the facts of shared experience. Culture is a unifying experience. We're moving towards a center which is infinite. Our guide is representative human nature, universal, timeless, recognizable, even to the point where we recognize something we've never seen before as true to life. In this sense, representative human nature is a dynamic force, alive and open to improvement, because it depends on the inner check, that is, the ethical imagination of every one of us. We all make culture. We become more human, which in turn gives culture its rejuvenating power. We're now in a position to define culture. Culture is the exploration and cultivation of humanity through art. Cultivation means we get better.
Very good. I recognize art, therefore art exists. No matter how great the artist, if no one appreciates his work, then he goes unrecognized. Therefore, no culture. It's up to us as judges.
But the artist has no responsibility to culture or to us. He serves art alone. His job is he just has to be truthful. This is the true meaning of the l'art pour l'art movement, mistakenly translated as art for art's sake. But then the English have never understood it. The painter, Whistler, a great Francophile who did understand it, is a protagonist of the creed, and we must seek his opinion before we can safely say that we have found art.
Art happens. No hovel is safe from it. No prince may depend on it. The vastest intelligence cannot bring it about, and puny efforts to make it universal end in quaint comedy and coarse farce. This is as it should be. Why, after centuries of freedom from it and indifference to it, should the people have art thrust upon them? She has no desire to teach, no purpose to better others. Art seeks the artist alone. Where he is, there she appears, and remains with him, loving and fruitful. And when he dies, she sadly takes her flight. With the man, then, and not with the multitude, are her intimacies, and in the book of her life, the names inscribed are few, scant indeed, the list of those who have helped to write her story of love and beauty.
We also have our part in all true art. For remember, representative human nature that makes the whole world kin.
True indeed, but let not the unwary jauntily suppose that Shakespeare herewith hands him his passport to paradise, and thus permits him speech among the chosen. Rather, learn that in this very phrase, representative human nature, he is condemned to remain without, to continue with the common.
You mean that what is popular is also vulgar? And is the artist, then, a freak of nature? We small band of art lovers expect no favours from art, but from you, the artist, we hope to see the world through your eyes. In this way, we serve art.
You get out what you put in. That's my motto from now on. As a painter, perhaps, art will visit me someday, just like the fairy with blue hair.
Mr. Whistler, I fear for these young people. In your field, painting, which has had such an impact on our lives, there is nothing happening nowadays. What are they to do? All their friends run around trying to catch the latest thing. When you're young, you like to think something is happening.
Running around? I don't waste time, I make time. To see the latest thing. The Rokeby Venus, Manet's Olympia. There is so much happening outside time.
If art be rare today, it was seldom heretofore. It is false, this teaching of decay. The master stands in no relation to the moment at which he occurs. A monument of isolation, hinting at sadness, having no part in the progress of his fellow men. He is also no more the product of civilization than is the scientific wisdom of the period. The assertion itself requires the man to make it. The truth was from the beginning. So art is limited to the infinite, and beginning there cannot progress. We have then but to wait until, with the mark of the gods upon him, there come among us again the chosen, who shall continue what has gone before. Satisfied that, even were he never to appear, the story of the beautiful is already complete, hewn in the marbles of the Parthenon, and broidered with the birds upon the fan of Hokusai at the foot of Fujiyama.
Mr. Whistler, are you the only American genius?
Progress in art, Picasso. What would he not have given to capture the manner of these bulls from the cave paintings of 20,000 BC? If art progressed, then today's painter would be greater than Picasso.
It's true, we don't have to wait for art, she exists. But time is running out for the art lovers. I'm talking about the planet. It's all very well to say that we can become more human through art, human enough to save the planet. Meanwhile, all we can do is believe in Alice and Pinocchio. At least they will have the advantage of a sane outlook on life.
Giant projection of Hitler's face, in relation to which Hitler, standing on the podium in front, seems to be about the size of a garden gnome.
All effective propaganda has to limit itself only to a very few points, and to use them like slogans.
Alice and Pinocchio, we have come to the end of our journey, and you have passed the test. In the pursuit of art, you became automatically impervious to propaganda. Indeed, each of you quite forgot to take your daily Ninsdol pill. You are no longer addicted to nationalistic idolatry, non-stop distraction, and organized lying, the three constituents of propaganda. The art lovers now invite you to become members of our movement, Active Resistance. Let us progress to the inauguration ceremony. However, on the way, we could just look in at a conference on culture, which is attended by those very same art lovers who, in the beginning, had no interest in coming on our journey. Here is the conference in Paris. Pinocchio, I know you're dying to go to the Louvre, but Alice, you could just pop back in your book. I'll put you in my pocket and take you in.
And man came out of Africa 180,000 years ago.
The talk lasts 3/4 of an hour.
He's scared of seeming Eurocentric.
And the good thing is, he ended up in Paris.
Quite right, too. France was the greatest flowering of Western culture for the 3 centuries up until the First World War, interrupted by the Revolution, of course. Pinocchio, I've come out of the conference now. Pinocchio, you certainly had the chance to immerse yourself in the Louvre. The conference was a continuous drone of complacency for 3 days. I went to this conference. I thought, I will stay to know if it is this bad. I managed to get my word in early on. I wanted to say, and I said it, that you can't have culture without justice before the law. And I cited the withdrawal of Habeas Corpus, which is still the case in England. There are people who've been 10 years under house arrest, first 4 years in Belmarsh jail, who've still not been told what they did wrong or put in front of a court of law, and nobody even talks about it. All we do is say we've got habeas corpus. How can you have habeas corpus with exceptions? It must apply to everybody, or else we don't have it. Anyway, I made this political point. You can't have civilization without freedom. Anyway, there were other points made from the floor, squeezed in between the long speeches of the art gurus and the banquets.
We need more festivals.
We need a common vision of the importance of television and cinema for the cohesion of society.
Dance is the only international language. It should be at the top of every gender.
I need the state to sponsor my music. The internet only helps established artists.
Young people should know that culture is not entertainment.
We have not mentioned American culture.
I think the purpose of the conference was to say that European culture has value. How do we retain it and also promote it? That's what the conference was about. The problem was that everybody there assumed himself so cultivated that nobody bothered to define culture. Everybody thought the more he appreciated everything, the more cultivated he was. They mix up culture with anthropology, the anthropological type of culture, the science that treats of traditional crafts and customs of groups of people who are different from our groups. Well, something different is not always art. And culture is not local and peripheral, but a universal and centralizing power.
Yes, true culture occurs in another way. The artist is alive to difference, and that is what makes his work original. He sees the common element in things that are apparently different and discriminates between things that are apparently similar. The Chinese say that the painter finds likeness in unlikeness and unlikeness in likeness.
Anyway, contrary to what we understand by culture, the conference reiterated endlessly the mantra of cultural diversity. UNESCO is promoting this concept of cultural diversity in a universal declaration. And this is the kind of thing they say. I made a note. Since cultural goods and services arise from human creativity, it follows that cultural diversity will be enhanced in conditions conducive to creative activity and to the production and distribution of a wide range of cultural products, a global bazaar to promote tolerance and awareness. The delegates then got into trouble. They got confused. They wondered, how can we prevent tradition, the traditional culture, how can we prevent tradition being swallowed up in a global soup? The more festivals we have, the more it'll get mixed up. They were really confused as to how you keep the culture, how you keep the traditional behaviour, art, and how you stop it from getting mixed up with all this interaction. Anyway, so they were worried about it all being swallowed up in a global soup, along with vanilla ice cream topped with onion sauce, magic mushroom Cornish pasties, and
rat shit.
And Pinocchio, I think Alice has pinched some of your cheek. As we were leaving, she jumped out and yelled,
"You're all a pack of cards."
Children, you are expensive. Crap is not good enough for you. Time is your luxury. You like to be alone because you like to think. As art lovers and readers, you will converse with the highest forms of intelligence. You will form your own opinions, and your ideas will be the avant-garde. Ideas will give you power, and you will fire the imagination of your friends. You see through propaganda, therefore engage in politics. It is time for you to receive your badges from the noble warrior Leonard Peltier.
But Leonard is innocently serving time.
It is the spirit of Leonard which now speaks. Art is an imaginative illusion which captures the imagination. State your vows.
Every time I read a book, instead of looking at a magazine, go to the art gallery instead of watching TV, go to the theatre instead of the cinema, I fight for active resistance to propaganda.
The freedom fighter motto is, you get out what you put in.
Leonard pins on their active resistance badges.
Alice and Pinocchio, you are now in the presence of a great secret. Your journey has revealed to you that human beings have a choice. We can cultivate the human genius and build a great civilization on Earth. Through art, we could see the future. It holds up a mirror of our human potential. Or, as victims of our mere cleverness, we will remain the destructive animal. Our innovations can contribute to progress, but our humanity is a scientific fact and must be taken into account for advance to happen. Otherwise, we will have a partial science which will kill us. Indians have not made this mistake. They see the world in its entirety. Our first duty is to love our mother, Earth. Indians know the importance of living in harmony with creation. Men, not gods. The Greeks called human arrogance hubris.
Remember the myth of Icarus. Do not fly too near the sun. Your wings are made of wax.
Light radiates through the patterns in a mandala composed of concentric circles alternating with diminishing squares. The squares represent the organization and knowledge of man, and the circles represent the truth and chaos of nature.
Progress lies in the center of the mandala. This is the mirror of true progress.
Alice and Pinocchio look at themselves in the mirror.
Could I have my shawl, please? Wherever it is, Peter. And before we have any questions, I wanted to say something else. Can you hand it to me, Tyson? Sorry. Thank you. Sorry? There isn't much time for questions. Okay. Anyway, apparently there isn't much time for questions. We'll see. I'll be quite quick about this. I usually finish this talk. I wrote the manifesto a couple of years ago. If I had written it today, I don't think I would have had the heart to write it today, because a few months ago, it really hit me, the urgency of the danger we're in from the ecological problem. And really, we absolutely have to save the rainforest. That's the first thing we need to do. If we can find a way to save the rainforest, then we might be able to save the rest of the planet fit for human habitation. The prediction is that within 100 years, there will only be 1/5 of the world population left. The other 4/5 will have died in the most horrible circumstances over time. But nevertheless, I'm very glad about the manifesto, and I think it is important. I mean, what I'm saying is, have we really got time to be art lovers? What we should be doing is really trying to do something about this. And what you can do, I expect straight away, one thing you can do is sign up on Prince Charles's website, because he's trying to get things together to do something about it. A lot of people trying to do something about it. Each of us has to do something in some way or other. You have to start to try to find a way. Nevertheless, I believe the manifesto is fundamentally a very great truth. And if you do become an art lover, if you are, then you have got an incredible anchor and a ballast for understanding the world we live in. And you won't get blown away. If, for example, you were interested in politics and you read each day every newspaper and you tried to do something, you would very soon get disillusioned. It's very, very hard to make a difference. But with this foundation of this anchor in being an art lover, understanding culture, it's incredible weight and solidity for life and for your experience and for understanding the world you live in. Anyway, thank you. What about questions then? Are there questions or not? Okay. But you have the manifesto is a practice, and you should read it again. At least it might help to change your opinions a little bit. I mean, yeah, where is it? You know, this Chinese man who said he wanted to live in the pavilion of his faults. We only want to know, you know, what's wrong with us, don't we, hopefully? Okay.